Hello and welcome to this community conversation on single collection waste and recycling services in Saugatuck Township. If you're joining us in person, we're starting our presentation right now at 4:15, and we'll have a repeat presentation again at 5:15 with identical content just for folks that might be showing up a little bit later. After each presentation, we'll have some interactive stations and opportunities for feedback to share your thoughts, opinions, and ask any questions that you might have. If you're joining online, look for feedback opportunities on the Township website. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Joe Sikma, and I am privileged to be the Sustainability Manager for the ODC Network. We were asked to partner with the Township on this project through our Sustainability Services contract with the community, and are honored to be working on this project together with you. So as you may be aware, we sent out a survey in the August to September timeframe, just trying to get a better understanding of the current situation with residential waste and recycling in Saugatuck Township. This survey solicited some great feedback from the community. We received over 175 responses through the online forum. Some print forms were turned in. We also had some great conversations in person with residents as well. All of this was able to help us identify what's going well, some real opportunities for improvement, and places where there might be some faults or issues with the current system. So to get started today, let's walk through some of these findings and see what we discovered. So the first question that we wanted to discuss was what services are included in residents' current contracts. We found that almost all residents, at least in our respondent pool, indicated they have trash service through a local waste hauler. Of those that receive that waste service, we also found close to 60% are also receiving recycling services through their hauler as well. Yard waste was quite a bit lower at just about 10% of residents receiving that through their hauler. And then we did not find any additional services like compost or any other specialty items being provided by local haulers. So we chose to dive a little bit deeper into that recycling question, looking at the reasoning behind why, if almost 100% of residents are receiving waste services, why only 60% are receiving recycling services. So we looked at some factors there, the biggest of which was cost, as you can see indicated in the graph below. Some additional factors were availability of service, with some folks living in areas of the township that haulers are not currently providing recycling, as well as issues with frequency and convenience, not meeting the needs of customers in those areas. Some other things that popped up, especially in our little word cloud here with some of the writing submissions, some folks concerned about whether or not recycling actually gets recycled or if it's just taken to the landfill, and we'll address some of those concerns later in the presentation. So moving on to question 5. Question 5 looked into some of the decision factors when folks are looking at their residential waste contracts and what moved them to choose certain haulers over others. So you can see in our graph below, in dark green is what was indicated as very important. In kind of that middle green color, we see which percentages indicated these factors as somewhat important. And then the light green was percentages that indicated those factors as not important in their decision process. So consistency of service stuck out as the most important across the board for our respondents at around 91%. Following that closely were cost of service and quality of customer service in the 70% range. A little bit lower was variety of services. So that's things in addition to waste hauling, perhaps recycling, compost, or some specialty items. And then lastly, the lowest factor into the decision process was choice or flexibility of service provider. So that came in at just 41%, saying that was very important in their decision process. Question 6 was just a numerical scale trying to understand satisfaction with current providers. So you can see this was ranked 1 to 5. We did have a number of people that were satisfied with their current contracts. But in those other colors, other than green, we see well over half of township residents that responded to our survey said they're at least somewhat unsatisfied with their current contract. A lot of those folks in the 3 to 4 range, but we did find some in the 1 and 2 range indicating that they're very unsatisfied. And to match that, there were a lot of stories of people indicating that they had recently switched from one hauler to another for dissatisfaction with the previous hauler that they had had. So not many folks just sitting in that 1 to 2 range trying to get up to that 3 to 4, but we see well over half the community saying that there's room to improve the current situation in some way. So trying to figure out what was causing that dissatisfaction, we looked at just an open-ended question, trying to understand if there were concerns with the current waste hauler. We received a wealth of feedback and input, and we've combed through all of this and found some really great insights. So thank you for that. We won't read through them all today, but I'll try to share some of the high-level things that stood out for us. Major themes included cost, and particularly the cost of recycling. In addition to that, whether or not recycling actually happens, as I mentioned before in a previous question, availability of services through their waste hauler, damage to roads from multiple trucks on the road, spilled garbage out of trucks as they're moving through the community, and potentially leaking fluids, things like hydraulic fluid that happen through operation, frequency and convenience of services, reliability, and then special services, things like large item pickup, compost, some of those unique items like styrofoam or e-waste and hazardous chemicals. Our next question moved beyond just the service provider consumer relationship, looking at community-wide impacts and trying to understand if there was any concerns in that regard. We found again there were some folks that did not indicate any concerns, but there were a number of concerns related particularly to the number of different haulers operating in the community. So having 3 to 4 different operators creates concerns around things like wear and tear on roads, greenhouse gas emissions for multiple trucks down the street, traffic and safety with those multiple trucks, noise concerns, and some write-ins that talked about things like having limited options depending on different geographic areas of the township that folks may live in, trucks again spilling content on the road, and a variety of services. Finally, we turned it over to just an open-ended comment and question and feedback section. You can see again we received a wealth of insights here too. And again, the township is combing through all of these and trying to make sure we understand residents' wants and needs and concerns. Some of the high-level things that stuck out here, some repeats, were an interest in cooperation or negotiation as an entire community. So entering into a single hauler agreement to try to pool our collective voices. In opposition to that, there was some concerns with loss of choice and a desire to maintain the ability to negotiate as an individual customer. We saw a strong interest in recycling, a lot of folks looking to add that to their current contract or interested in improving it in some way. And we also had many individuals who actually only had one choice right now because of where they live, and felt somewhat constrained because they're acting as only one customer. They don't have the power to control the services that are provided by that one hauler that will reach them. So not going to have the ability to negotiate in the current circumstances. My favorite comment is circled in red, kind of in the top section there. Someone wrote in, "Thanks for listening." And that's really the spirit of the survey and again of the event happening today. Nothing is set in stone yet. We're trying to go through a learning process right now to better understand the community's needs, all with the goal of improving waste and recycling services for residents, trying to understand those pain points and come to a solution that benefits the most number of people in the best way possible. So after our survey, we kind of moved into the next step of exploring how a single hauler program might benefit the community and the ways that we can address some of those specific needs brought up through that survey process and the conversations that we've had. We also looked to the Tri-Community Recycling Committee's recent report on Sagatuck Township's recycling program, and also had just some great in-person conversations with township residents to better understand their unique situations. So as the ODC network stepping in to be a partner in this process with the township, we turned after the survey to our local peers, partners, and experts that we get to work with every day. So a number of those folks unfortunately weren't able to make it tonight, but we did have one good participant in Dan Bursman, who's here for those of you that are in person to hear from and share some of his insights and wisdom. But some of those groups that we reached out to include the Allegan County Road Commission to better understand the waste hauler's impact on the road system, things like safety and traffic as well. Dan and some of his colleagues from the city of Holland, who has its own single hauler system that's been in place for a while. The city recently revamped its recycling program, something we got to partner with them on, and it's achieved some great results so far. The city is one of the highest performers in the state right now in terms of recycling participation and material recovery. So some great insights from them as a partner just up the road from us. We also talked to Karen O'Brien, who is the executive director for the Michigan Recycling Coalition, Karen is a regionally known expert in this space, particularly on the recycling side. She's an advocate for this type of move in many of our local communities, and just has a lot of good information and insights on how to go through this process smoothly and bring out the best results for our residents. And then lastly, kind of keeping with the recycling theme and looking to insights and opportunities to benefit not just our community, but local industry, the environment, and our local economy, we looked to manufacturers to understand, especially with recycling, if there's a need and a draw for that right now. One of the big conversations that we've been able to have, especially with our partnership with Dan and the City of Holland, is with Cascade Engineering. Cascade actually provides what they call eco carts for the City of Holland, where they're taking the recycled materials from city residents and producing their recycling carts with them. So having a really valuable need and local outcome, and a great story for recycling in the community. It's not going to waste, it's actually being used to produce materials in the community. And through that conversation, we learned in the 2017 timeframe, I think a lot of people are aware of some concerns about where that recycling material was going. At that time, China introduced what they called the National Sword Policy, that essentially cut off import of plastics into their country. So for a while, the rest of the world was scrambling to figure out what to do with its plastics, and recycling did halt in some places. But in light of the material shortages and supply chain issues in this post-COVID world, there's a lot of demand right now for those material, and a lot of industries are trying to recover plastics in particular, but all different types of recyclables to use in their supply chains. Another industry representative that we talked about their company currently trying to source post-consumer plastics from as far away as the Caribbean. So putting that on container ships and shipping it up here to use in their products because there's such a demand for it. A need for those materials and a need from consumers for environmentally responsible materials and products. So there's lots of draw and demand for recycling again, and we see some big opportunities to play into our local community, support local businesses, local jobs, and the environment in that way. Beyond our survey work and our conversations with some of our fellow partners, we also did some benchmarking. So looking at the local community, some of our neighbors just up and down the street and around us who have had these programs for a while, City of Saugatuck, Douglas, Holland. We expanded our search to the entire state and even the entire country with around 24 communities in that space. So these communities in the middle column and the right-hand column have all gone through a single hauler program implementation in the past 3 to 5 years. And we went through and read through their documentation and public meeting minutes and things of that nature to better understand the motive for that switch, how the process went, what went well, what some of the pain points were, just to better understand the successes of those programs and how to implement them smoothly with as little hiccups or issues for residents in the community as possible. So after all of this work, we came up with a pretty good list of benefits that we found that we think would be applicable for Saugatuck Township with a single waste hauler program. Again, if you're able to join us in person, you'll hear from Dan Boersma on a number of these and the experience that the City of Holland has had with this program. But I'll walk through the rest for those of you that might be tuning in online. Really, the big benefit that kind of yields the rest of the benefits in this list is bargaining power. When we stand together as a community to negotiate or work with a waste hauler, we have better collective representation than we would as an individual customer. And that yields a number of additional opportunities, things like reducing costs. We found in our benchmarking that costs are cut anywhere from 25 to 75% for communities that have a single hauler program as opposed to individual contracts. Additional services. So when a community works together, they can help advocate for things like recycling, compost, extra pickups, some of those specialty items that they wouldn't otherwise be able to pull off on their own. Improve customer service. When there's enough customers, hundreds or thousands of customers, oftentimes the waste hauler will dedicate staff to serve those customers individually. So rather than jumping on the phone line and talking to someone in another state or even another country, you'll be having someone that's in your community and has a good understanding and a grasp of your unique needs and concerns. Consistency. This comes with having trucks that are stopping at each house on the road rather than having to follow complex routes with a number of different houses. It's a lot harder to miss a house or miss a can when you're moving one by one down the street as opposed to trying to hopscotch from different house to house. and hopefully avoid those missed pickups or issues with trucks not coming on time. Reduce traffic and road maintenance. This follows with not having multiple haulers in the community. Having 1 or 2 trucks that can follow a well mapped out route that's more efficient and reduces the number of trucks and time on the road. Helps out with wear and tear from having heavy trucks moving back and forth, and some of the slow traffic that comes with the stops at all the houses. Along with that, there's safety. Less trucks means less slowdowns, less people trying to pass trucks, and issues with that regard. Aesthetics, that can come from having common pickup days. So often communities will be divided into separate sections, and each section will have its own pickup day. That means just one day with carts in the street as opposed to multiple days. And some better color coordination and aesthetics of those programs as well, complementing our already beautiful community here in Saugatuck Township. Burden of negotiation, this one stems again to the bargaining power piece, hopefully keeping you off of those long call wait lists as you're trying to get to customer service. Billing will likely be handled still through the service provider, but the township will be responsible for handling any issues with cost increases or advocating for additional services, or speaking on behalf of the community to make sure that we're getting the best service possible from that selected hauler. And then lastly, as we alluded to with some of the industry representatives that we spoke to, an opportunity for the community to feed into the growing recycling network in Michigan. Again, to support local industry, local jobs, protecting the environment, and really be on the front end of that movement and a leader as our community. Another big one that's worth calling out that we found through our survey and some of our discussions with folks that have been through this already is the opportunity to jump into interlocal contracts and agreements. So working with our neighbors in Douglas or the city of Saugatuck to pool together our representation with a single waste hauler and potentially amplify those benefits. So rather than just a couple hundred, a couple thousand voices, if it's several thousand voices, it makes our leverage and our bargaining power even greater to help work on some of those benefits even more. And furthermore, it empowers the community as we look at things like the Tri-Community Recycling Initiative, giving them better resources, better opportunities to access grants and funding and shared learning resources when we pool those programs together. So the question we've all been asking, or maybe some of the questions we've been asking, what does it mean for me? This is really something that the township is trying to lean into, and the honest and transparent answer is we don't have all the answers yet. But we've learned enough to think that this is the right decision and something we want to move forward with. But we want to make sure as we do so that we're understanding all of the unique concerns and situations and questions that residents might be asking. So there's a number of questions that I'll try to provide some insights and some possible answers to here. But we also have our interactive stations afterward to make sure that we're considering and listening to the unique needs that you might have or questions that you're asking. And then we can bring those into the next step as we start to talk to waste haulers and consider the RFP process. So one of the biggest and first questions we get is, what about my current contract? This is a good question. As we look to some of the communities that we benchmarked with, most communities will set a deadline 2 to 3 years out, and they allow residents over time to join into the program as their current contracts expire. So if you're still locked in for 3 months, 6 months, or even a year plus, that's okay. But once you reach that expiration date, that's when you would terminate your contract with the current hauler, if it's not the single hauler that's selected, and jump into the community's new single waste hauler program. Next question follows well with that. What about the carts that I currently have? Again, you can keep your cart until your contract expires. If it's provided by the hauler that is selected to be the single hauler in the township, you can probably keep it. Otherwise, it'll be picked up when your contract is concluded. How will billing be handled? This is a good one too. Billing will most likely come to the selected hauler, at least to start. This is where most townships begin, is the township is still the advocate and using that collective bargaining power to work with the hauler, but billing comes through their department. There could be a potential in the future, especially with an interlocal agreement, to fund a local position. The city of Holland does this, where they have someone on the DPW staff who helps to field some of those customer service calls and handles the billing. But it will likely just start with billing coming through the single hauler provider. Next question, will there be an option for seasonal service for part-time residents and rentals? This is a good one and really highlights the fact that we want to make sure we're considering Saugatuck Township's unique characteristics and the needs of our residents. So knowing that there's a lot of part-time residents and rentals in the community, we want to bring this into our RFP process and make sure that we're emphasizing the need for that. This is something that other townships, cities, municipalities have been able to achieve in their agreements with their contract. So something we'll look to as we talk to those haulers and make sure it's a possibility. We just have to make sure we work out what that process actually looks like in practice. A couple more questions. Will drive-out service be available? So this is talking about the truck being able to get the cart somewhere other than the street, whether that's a back door or closer to the residence. This is something that we will certainly emphasize through the RFP process. Preference will be given to haulers that are able to meet this. Generally, this comes with qualifications, so whether that's for the elderly, the disabled, or for someone that might be willing to pay extra if it's a situation with a rental or a timeshare. But usually it's something that's achievable. We just have to make sure we have a clear set of qualifications for how that takes place. How frequently will recycling be picked up? This will largely depend on the hauler that is chosen. We can say pretty confidently that it will most likely be a 96-gallon cart being picked up every other week. This is what most townships, especially in Michigan, are working out with their haulers. It's just the most convenient and works the most efficiently for the hauler systems. We have seen communities like the city of Holland and Dan's area. There's opportunities if you need more than that to get an additional cart for a pretty low cost. So that's something that could be looked into. But this is most likely the route that we'll see at least to start. And then finally, can I opt out altogether? This is similar to that seasonal question. Residents will most likely maintain the option to opt out. We don't want to force people to participate in our program, but in order to have a single hauler contract, that will mean that if you opt out, you're not able to contract with another hauler in Saugatuck Township. So if you have an ability to dispose of your waste through your business, or if you have another home in another community that you take your waste to, you'll still be able to do that and not need to pay for this service, but we won't allow residents to contract with other contractors that are not a single hauler. So before we get into the feedback session and some of our interactive stations, we just wanted to highlight a roadmap for the future. This is kind of a potential next steps that we could go through. We'll take our feedback from today and hopefully your wonderful insights and some of the things that we heard from the survey and pull that together into a presentation for the board to review and to look at as they consider moving forward. With the board's approval, we'll go to the RFP process and begin working with haulers to see how they can address these concerns and put together a package that best serves Saugatuck Township. After the RFP process and hauler selection would be program rollout. We're targeting that for early 2023. Hopefully getting started next year. And again, it will be that rolling start for folks as their contracts expire and they jump on board. And then as with all new programs and systems, we know that it's not perfect on the first try and it takes some review and revision. So we'll set up a process for that to work with the community to find opportunities to make this better as time goes on, and also to consider that interlocal partnership with our neighbors in Douglas and Saugatuck as the opportunity may arise in the future. So with that, for our in-person guests who came in today, we'll have some interactive stations we'll set up for you here, looking at special offerings and providing an opportunity to indicate which of the special offerings, things like extra pickups, recycling, yard waste, compost, and things of that nature are important to you. If you see them listed there, you can put a sticker on those cards to indicate that they're important. If one's missing, let us know. And we'd love to have that for people to weigh on as well. We also have just general comment cards, some index cards for folks to write any questions, comments, or concerns that they want considered. And we'd love to have these written. That way we can make sure that we keep them and move forward with all this feedback and can have it on the table for the township to look at and consider. And then finally, we have a sheet for a task force sign up. This is something that the township is looking into for the future. As we move through the RFP process and implementation, many communities will assemble a group of community members to help guide that process, weigh in on decision making, and work collectively to make sure the program is as optimal as it can be. So this task force sign up is just indicating that you're interested in learning more about that, not committing to any meetings or set times or major activities, but just saying that you'd like to be contacted in the future and are willing to be a part of that group. and we'll get in touch with you in the next couple of weeks or months as that's developed. If you're joining online, again, look for opportunities for feedback through the township's website or get in touch with us through the contact page there. And thank you for tuning in. We appreciate the opportunity as the ODC to help facilitate this conversation. Thanks to Saugatuck Township for working with us on this. Thank you to Saugatuck High School for hosting our meeting today. Thanks most importantly to each of the residents who's tuned in, willing to share your feedback and insights and help us to move through this process and into the future. Thank you.